Elliot had never been away from home for more than a week, so stepping into the ivy-covered boarding school left him dizzy with nerves. He was 13, small for his age, and painfully aware that everyone around him seemed to know each other already. He found his room and pushed the door open. His roommate, Calder, was waiting inside, tall, pale, and unnervingly quiet. Calder didn't greet Elliot. He just stared, eyes flicking over him, as if measuring his very soul. The room was ordinary enough. 2 beds, 2 desks, a tiny closet, and a single flickering lamp on the wall. It was small, but it was supposed to be a safe space. Calder pushed a folded piece of paper toward Elliot without a word. "Read it," he said, his voice low, almost a growl. Elliot unfolded it. It was a list of rules, simple words, but strangely specific. No frogs, no salt, no matches, no mirrors. He frowned. Frogs. Why would anyone ban frogs in a dorm room? It sounded like a joke, but Calder's face was dead serious. Elliot didn't ask, afraid his new roommate might get angry. Calder simply nodded, seemingly satisfied, and returned to his bed. He pulled a worn notebook from beneath his mattress and clutched it to his chest, his eyes never leaving Elliot. Weeks passed, and the strangeness only deepened. Elliot noticed things that didn't make sense, things that made the hair on his arms stand up. Calder muttered to himself at night, low whispers that sometimes escalated into a rhythmic, chant-like hum. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to stretch and twist when Calder wasn't looking, reaching out like long, skeletal fingers. Sometimes, Elliot would wake to find objects on his desk, move the pen here, a book there, or a strange smell like wet earth and decay lingering in the air. He tried to rationalize everything. Maybe Calder was just eccentric. Maybe he had an overactive imagination. Maybe this was all just a series of coincidences. But a cold, gnawing curiosity refused to let him go. One afternoon, when Calder left for soccer practice, Elliot's resolve broke. He had to know what was in that notebook. His hands shaking, he reached under Calder's mattress and pulled it out. The leather cover was cold and worn. He opened it. The first few pages were blank, but as he flipped further, his blood ran cold. Near the back were names, dozens of them, written in a cramped, spidery script. Many were crossed out with a vicious red line. Some were circled, and then he saw it. At the bottom of the last page, written neatly but not crossed out, was his own name, Elliot. His heart thudded in his chest like a trapped bird. Why was his name here? What did the circles and crossed-out names mean? He shoved the notebook back under the mattress, a new, more profound terror taking root. That first night, after finding the notebook, Elliot couldn't sleep. He lay under his blanket, eyes wide, staring at the deep, inky corners of the room. A cold draft, impossible in the sealed room, brushed against his neck. He felt a presence near his bed, heavy and ancient. "Elliot," a whisper hissed. The voice wasn't Calder's. It was hollow, distorted, like wind whistling through a crack in a tomb. Elliot froze. A scream caught in his throat. He tried to move, but his limbs were like lead. The shadows near the closet began to writhe and coalesce, twisting into a shape that wasn't human. Then, as if from nowhere, Calder appeared at the edge of his bed, his expression completely unreadable in the dim light. "You're dreaming," he said softly. The words were calm, but the room felt charged, like the air before a lightning strike. Elliot wanted to believe him. He desperately wanted to. But the shadow stretched closer, its clawed fingers reaching for his face. He jerked awake, or so he thought. He was sitting bolt upright in bed, gasping for air. The window across the room was shattered, shards of glass littering the floor like fallen stars. The shadow was gone, but the room felt wrong, heavier, the air thick with malice. Calder sat at his desk, pretending to write, as calm as if nothing had happened. "Did you do this?" Elliot demanded, his voice shaking. Calder slowly tilted his head, a gesture that was somehow more menacing than a shout. "Do what?" he asked, his voice flat. Nothing about his reply made sense. Calder hadn't moved. The glass was real. Elliot's fear was real. Over the next week, the haunting escalated. Whispers echoed in empty corners. Doors slammed shut by themselves. His belongings were rearranged into impossible, geometric patterns when he wasn't looking. Each night, Elliot felt the same dark presence, always just at the edge of his vision, watching, waiting, its patience seemingly infinite. Then came the sleep paralysis. Elliot woke one night to find himself completely frozen in his bed, his eyes the only part of him that could move. His heart hammered against his ribs. The dark mass appeared again, swirling on the ceiling above him, a living vortex of shadow. It pulsed, it breathed, and it descended toward him, the sound of its claws scraping against his wooden bed frame echoing in the silent room. He was trapped, helpless. Just as its cold touch was about to graze his skin, he saw Calder standing by the door, silently watching, his face a mask of indifference. At that moment, the dark figure retracted suddenly, as if it had been caught doing something it shouldn't. It recoiled, aware of Calder's presence, and vanished through the solid wall, leaving behind only an arctic chill. The paralysis released him, and Elliot collapsed into a fit of racking sobs, his body shaking uncontrollably. Calder finally spoke, his voice quiet but sharp as glass. "You shouldn't have looked." There was no apology, no explanation, just a chilling warning. In that moment, Elliot understood. This wasn't just a strange roommate playing pranks. Calder wasn't the source of the terror. He was something else entirely. Maybe a guardian, maybe a warden. But whatever he was connected to something far older, far darker, and entirely beyond Elliot's comprehension. From that night on, he avoided the dorm room whenever possible. He spent his time in the library, the common room, anywhere but there. The notebook remained under Calder's mattress, a silent testament to the horrors he'd witnessed. The whispers continued. The shadows lingered, and Elliot understood, with a clarity that froze his soul, that some horrors don't need names to terrify you. Some only need a witness. Thank you for watching. If this story sent a chill down your spine, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more tales from the shadows. Stay safe and check under your bed. The attic reflection. Vivian had always loved exploring her grandmother's old house. It was massive, creaking with age, and filled with the scent of dust, cedar, and faint perfume from decades past. Her grandmother, Margot, rarely went into the attic anymore, claiming it was too full of memories. But Vivian's curiosity never let that stop her. She had spent countless afternoons imagining what treasures might lie hidden under the slanted roof, behind stacks of old trunks and cobwebbed furniture. One rainy afternoon, Vivian convinced her neighbor and friend Lucas to join her. "Just for an hour," she promised. "We'll find something amazing." Lucas was skeptical. He preferred video games and comic books, not old houses. But Vivian's excitement was contagious, and he eventually agreed. The attic stairs groaned under their weight as they climbed. The narrow steps coated in decades of dust. At the top, a beam of sunlight pierced the gloom, illuminating motes of dust floating like tiny stars. That was when Vivian noticed it. An ornate mirror leaning against the far wall. Its frame was carved with strange, twisting patterns that looked almost like faces screaming silently. The glass was darkened with age, but something about it seemed alive. Vivian approached it slowly. The reflection staring back wasn't quite right. At first glance, it was just her, messy hair and rain-dampened clothes. But then subtle differences appeared. Her eyes were slightly wider, her expression almost frantic. When she raised a hand, the reflection mimicked her, but with a delayed, jerky motion, like it was thinking before acting. "Vivian, it's just a mirror," Lucas said nervously, but his voice wavered. He was staring too, and she could see it in his face. He didn't want to admit it, but even he felt the chill crawling up his spine. For hours, they experimented. Vivian waved, jumped, and even whispered into the glass. Each time, the reflection responded differently, sometimes anticipating her moves, sometimes hesitating. It wasn't showing them a simple reflection. It was observing, learning, changing. Then Vivian's reflection began to smile. It wasn't her smile. It was sharp, malicious, too wide for her face. She stumbled back. "Lucas, it's smiling at me," she whispered. Lucas leaned in to see. The reflection reached out a hand, fingers pressed against the glass, as if it wanted to break through. Vivian's heart pounded. "We should leave," Lucas said, but curiosity rooted her to the spot. Wait, she said. Look at this. She focused on the reflection, and suddenly it began showing things that hadn't happened yet. A spilled lamp on the floor, shadows creeping along the walls, a figure standing in the corner of the attic behind them. Vivian's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the figure. It was herself, but twisted, with hollow eyes and pale skin. Reaching toward the glass, she tried to pull back, but something held her gaze. The mirror seemed to thrum with energy, almost calling to her. Her reflection leaned closer, mouthing words she couldn't hear. Panic set in. Lucas, help me. Lucas grabbed her arm. Vivian, stop looking. Come on. But when he looked at the mirror again, he saw it to a version of Vivian being pulled into the glass. Fingers stretching, face twisting in silent scream. He didn't hesitate. He yanked her back, ripping her away from the edge of the mirror. They both collapsed on the attic floor, gasping. The mirror, now calm, reflected only their terrified faces. No figure, no hands, no movement, as if it had never tried to pull her in at all. Vivian's single quotes as mind raced. The mirror wasn't just old glass. It was a trap, feeding on fear and fascination. She thought of the names of all the children who might have looked into it before her, trapped by curiosity. She realized how easily one could disappear if they weren't careful. We have to tell someone, Lucas said finally, still shaken. Margot won't understand. Vivian replied, she knows. She just doesn't want it disturbed. Together, they covered the mirror with an old dusty sheet, ignoring the feeling that it was watching them even beneath the cloth. They descended the stairs in silence, rain still pounding against the windows. Neither spoke for the rest of the afternoon. That night, Vivian lay awake, hearing strange whispers echoing in her mind, voices that weren't hers, murmuring from somewhere deep within the house. She tried to rationalize it as imagination, but the memory of the reflections reaching hands haunted her. Sleep did not come easily, and when she finally drifted off, she dreamed of a mere world where her reflection waited, always patient, always watching, always hungry for the next mistake. Vivian understood now. Curiosity could be deadly, and sometimes the things that seem harmless, an attic, a mirror, a glance could reach out and change everything forever. The forgotten neighborhood had always been fascinated by abandoned places. As a teenager, he'd spent weekends exploring forgotten factories, shuttered schools, and old houses left to rot. His best friend Celine shared the obsession, though she approached it more cautiously. Together, they made a team. Dante would push the boundaries. Celine would take notes and photographs. One weekend, they heard about a neighborhood on the outskirts of town that had been deserted for decades. Entire streets of houses were empty, sidewalks cracked, and streetlights bent like broken teeth. Rumor had it that the residents vanished overnight, leaving everything behind, even meals on tables and clothes hanging in closets. No one could explain why. This is perfect, Dante said, his eyes gleaming. We could spend the whole day here, no interruptions. Celine hesitated. Perfect for who? Ghosts. Something's not right, Dante. Why would a whole neighborhood just disappear? Urban legends, he replied, shrugging. Come on, it's just another abandoned place. Nothing can hurt us. They arrived just before dusk. The air was thick and still, carrying a faint, metallic scent. As they walked through the first row of houses, everything seemed frozen in time. Dishes sat in sinks, newspapers on porches were yellowed but intact, and a rocking chair swayed slightly despite no wind. Celine shivered. See, nothing dangerous, Dante said, snapping photos. They continued deeper into the neighborhood. That's when Dante noticed something odd. Shadows seemed to move against the light, but the source of light wasn't obvious. At first he thought it was trick of the evening sun, but the shadows didn't match the buildings or trees. Celine, do you see that? He whispered. She nodded slowly. Yeah, it's like someone's walking, but there's no one there. As night fell, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. Streetlights flickered, even though they hadn't been functional for years. Whispers, almost too soft to hear, floated in the air, repeating fragments of words. Don't look, don't stay, leave now. Dante laughed nervously. Creepy, but probably just the wind through the cracks. Celine didn't respond. She was staring at one particular house at the end of the block. It was smaller than the others, but something about it made her stomach twist. The windows reflected their own images back at them, but in one, the reflection of a little girl appeared, waving. Celine spun to see if anyone was there. No one. Did you see that? She asked, voice tight. See what? Dante said, walking closer. The moment they stepped toward the house, the door creaked open on its own. A cold draft poured out, carrying the smell of rot and mildew. Celine grabbed Dante's arm. We shouldn't. We have to. Dante interrupted. He was already moving inside. The interior was dimly lit by moonlight streaming through broken windows. Furniture was decayed, but neatly arranged, as if waiting. On the floor, there was a series of photographs. They were black and white, showing families living normal lives. Yet, the faces were wrong. Elongated smiles, eyes too wide, some missing entirely. Celine gagged, but Dante barely noticed, captivated by the images. Then they heard it. Footsteps upstairs, slow and deliberate. Dante froze. Selena's hand shook as she pointed toward the staircase. A figure emerged, a child, pale and translucent, dragging a shadow behind it that didn't belong. Its eyes were hollow, dark voids, staring straight at them. We shouldn't be here, Celine whispered, voice shaking. The child's mouth opened unnaturally wide, and the whispers became words. Stay, stay forever. Dante realized too late that the entire neighborhood wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. Every house held the trapped echoes of the people who had vanished. Shadows stretched toward them, forming hands, faces, mouths. The air thickened, pressing on their lungs. Celine grabbed his arm and screamed, "Run!" They bolted through the house, shadows clawing at their heels. The neighborhood twisted, streets bending in impossible directions. Doors led to walls. Windows showed endless darkness. It was a labyrinth of memory and fear. Finally, they reached the edge of the neighborhood, gasping for air. The streets behind them appeared normal now, empty and quiet. The moonlight reflected off cracked asphalt. Nothing moved. They looked at each other, hearts pounding, sweat dripping. We can't tell anyone," Celine said. "They'll never believe us. And if we come back," her voice trembled, "they'll take us too." Dante nodded silently, finally understanding. Some places are forgotten for a reason. Some horrors exist just to remind you that curiosity can be deadly. The neighborhood wasn't abandoned. It was waiting. It had always been waiting. That night, as they lay in their beds, both dreamed of pale children, endless streets, and shadows that whispered their names. They knew they would never forget. The memory would linger, a permanent scar from the neighborhood that refused to release its secrets.